Hi, this is Peter Schiff. It's Monday, May 18th, 2009. First of all, I want to talk about this op-ed piece I read in the New York Times on Sunday, the business section, by Alan Blinder, who is an economics professor at Princeton University. It was actually former vice chair at the Federal Reserve. And if you read what Blinder wrote, I mean, it definitely shows that in order to be an economics professor at an Ivy League university, you basically have to flunk a course in basic economics. You know, what Blinder is arguing is that he's trying to reassure us that we're not going to have a depression because we're not going to repeat the mistakes of the 1930s. Of course, he doesn't understand that he's repeating all the mistakes of the 1930s. First, in his article, he talks about the fact that Obama is not going to be like Hoover and sit by and wait and let the free market operate. That he's not going to just stand back. That he's going to interfere. Whereas Herbert Hoover did nothing and hoped that laissez-faire capitalism would work. Of course, we know that's nonsense. Hoover didn't do nothing. That was the problem. Had he done nothing, the way Blinder suggests, then we would not have had a depression. It's precisely because he took the actions that Barack Obama is advocating and that Bush did that we are going to repeat the Great Depression. I mentioned this on the blog before, but if you haven't done so, you should go to my website at europac.net, and on the home page in the upper right-hand corner, you can download for free a white paper by Thomas Wood that really points out this situation or sheds some light on it. Now, also in this Blinder piece from the Times, he also says that one of the other problems that we had with Roosevelt was the depression within a depression in 1936, according to Blinder, was the result of Roosevelt's foolish attempts to try to rein in some of the deficit spending. He says that the Obama administration is not going to be this foolish, that we're going to make no attempt whatsoever to rein in the deficit spending, that we're going to run the deficits until the economy recovers, and we're not going to try to rein them in prematurely. Of course, this is utter nonsense. More government spending is making the economy worse, especially since we're financing it through going deeper into debt. It's just amazing how little any of the mainstream economists, particularly the ones from the Harvards and the Yales and the Princetons, really understand about basic economics. And, something absolutely ridiculous. I was watching the Fox shows, the business shows, over the weekend. And, some of these Fox Saturday morning shows were featured very prominently in that Peter Schiff was right video, which is probably one of the reasons why they don't invite me back on these shows. And it's too bad because they need some, some reasoned voices to appear on those shows. So when people like Mike Norman says something so crazy, like he said on Saturday, there's actually somebody that knows how to combat him. But apparently, they'd rather have all the people on the show that constantly got it wrong rather than the one guest that they had that got it right. But one of the things that Norman said that was just so amazing, they were having a debate on national health insurance and whether or not we can afford it given our financial circumstances. And Mike Norman tried to point out that the whole discussion is nonsense, that there's no limit to what the government can afford. We can have anything we want. He said now that we're no longer on a gold standard, we can have everything because the government can print money, and that whatever the government wants, it can afford it because it can print the money to pay for it. I mean, this is the type of economic wisdom. I mean, just print money? This is it? This is his solution? Everything is free? I mean, too bad the world isn't that easy. I mean, according to Mike Norman, there should be no hunger, there should be no starvation or famine, there should be no economic downturns of any kind anywhere in the world. All governments need to do is print money and they can have whatever they want. They can simply print prosperity into existence by running money off a printing press. It's absolutely amazing. I mean, the one valid point that he makes, he didn't even realize he made it, was that when we were on a gold standard, we had some discipline. Now that we have no gold standard, there is no discipline. That's the problem. The fact that politicians can print money to fund whatever they want, that's not a good thing. According to Norman, this is fantastic. This is the greatest, thing since sliced bread, that we don't have to pay for anything. As if being on a gold standard prevents prosperity, and now that we don't have a gold standard, we can have whatever we want. The fact that the politicians are now printing money is a bad thing because we can't have what we want just because they print money. All we're going to have is inflation. Somehow, Norman thinks that governments create purchasing power and they print money. They don't. Purchasing power is created by the producers in the world when we actually make stuff. You can't buy anything until it's made. That's, Say's law of supply creates its own demand. Legitimate demand comes from supply. Without supply, it doesn't matter how much demand there is, you're not going to have anything. And also, if you want to watch some interesting clips on YouTube, a former or a current Euro Pacific Capital client, Alan Grayson, who's been with me for over 10 years, was just elected to Congress as a Democrat down in Florida. Very, very bright guy, very bright guy. And if you go to YouTube and type in Alan Grayson and look at some of the videos there, one of them I think has got about 300,000 views. Another one with about 70,000 views is very interesting. But he's really grilling these Fed officials as they're testifying before his committee. So that's another congressman to watch for. He's very anti the Fed and what they're doing. I think he's actually working with Ron Paul on several things. And despite the fact that he's a Democrat and Ron Paul's a Republican, they actually see eye to eye on a lot of things. And I've had a lot of discussions with Alan Grayson. He's a very sharp guy. What I really also wanted to talk about on today's video blog is what happened over the weekend or last night in India, where we had a decisive election where the forces of free market reforms staunchly beat the communists. It was one of the most convincing elections that we've seen in India. And I think this is a very interesting election, and I think it marks significant progress in the global economy. India is the second largest country in the world behind China. There's over 1 billion people living in India. And anything that reins in excess of government in India will free up the productive capacity of the Indian people. And, demographically, there are a lot of very young people in India. They're bright, they're hardworking, and to the extent that they can be more productive, then these are another 1 billion potential consumers for the mature economies in Europe and Asia to replace the American consumer. Everybody is worried, what's going to happen to the global economy when Americans can't consume. And I've always argued that it doesn't matter, that our consumption is meaningless and anybody can do it. And the fact is, once the Indians are freer, once they have less government interference in their economy and they become more productive, as they produce more and they export more, they can import more. And I think an Indian consumer is going to be far more lucrative to the global economy than the American consumer. Number one, there's 3 or 4 times as many of them. But they can actually afford to import. As they produce stuff and export, other countries don't have to vendor finance them. When the Japanese or the Europeans want to sell products to India, Indian consumers have a way of paying for those products. In contrast to the American consumer, we can only consume as long as the supplying countries lend us the money. And these schemes are coming to an end because we can't pay it back. We've abused that credit. But this is central to my decoupling thesis, that the global economy is going to be able to thrive. Now, look, the Indian stock market was up 17% last night. The Indian rupee had a big gain against the dollar. All the other currencies are rising again today. I expect to see some further strength in these markets. If you look at India, you look at China, together these two countries represent about 37% of the world's population. That's enormous. I mean, the United States is only about 4.5% of the world's population. So people are focusing on the fact that Americans are too broke to consume. What about the rest of the world? And as their currencies really start to rise, as they can start to enjoy the fruits of their own labor, this is a whole new crop of consumers for the world's producers. So this is what we need to be focusing on. I think it's very important that as people in India are moving away from centralized government planning towards free market principles, what are we doing in the United States? We're moving in the opposite direction. We're abandoning free market principles and embracing centralized government planning, a big government. We're doing the exact opposite of what we should be doing. And that's exactly the reason that I've been as optimistic as I have been on the global economy, because I recognize these emerging trends. And I recognize that the global economy is going to be better off once they can get out from under the burden of having to subsidize the American economy. Anyway, that's it for today. So long.